Hello, Meoni here, and today I wanted to go through some interview questions that were released on a Dualshockers article where Giuseppe Nelva interviewed Naoki Yoshida, the director of Final Fantasy XIV. The article is in the description, so please go to it to support both the author and the site for putting out great interviews all year round, including ones on Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not particularly interested in everything that was talked about here, so there will be some skipping, but there were indeed some nuggets of information that are incredibly interesting to talk about. The first question posed how the team plans to deal with housing in 4.2. This comes as Yoshi and the team said previously they wanted to address the lack of housing by 4.2. Yoshida replies, "In order to resolve this issue, we will review the percentage of active players who own housing, as well as the number of active free companies that do not own housing, and from there work to add an appropriate amount of additional wards to all 4 existing housing areas in patch 4.2. Equal numbers of plots will be added to all 4 housing areas, so please keep in mind that we won't simply be adding a large number of wards to Shirogane just because it was so popular. We also are planning the implementation of new specifications related to the purchasing system as well, but we will announce further details as we get closer to the release." It begs to question then if this will really address the issue at hand. Restrictions on land ownership are always particularly difficult to enforce or police in games, especially ones where you have limited instance housing. A game like Arcade, for example, had limited land due to it being uninstanced, but it seems even instancing has its limitations technically. Either way, this is going to undoubtedly be a focus of some drama for quite some time, especially come 4.2. In a follow-up to that question, Dualshockers asked if they had any plans to provide new wards, or even extensions to current housing. They don't want to implement a system that makes use of a form of dynamic housing, changing with the demand, because, and I quote, "it could compromise the stability of the housing areas, which we would want to avoid at all costs," which is a fair reply. The next question I wanted to look at here is one on Squadrons. It was asked that if they had any future plans to expand on this feature, perhaps Fantasias or other expansions down the line. I believe that the appearance of each Squadron member our team has created ties into each of those characters' individuality, and I don't believe that we will go so far as to allow using Fantasia on these characters. I feel it would take away from their personality we've given them. We are planning on expanding the Squadron content itself in future updates, and plan to add features like taking on special missions, as well as expanding which dungeons you can challenge. I personally really enjoy the Squadron missions. It's allowed me to level my other classes up to level 50 and above, even post engage spam nerf. It's incredibly reliable and fast. I don't have to rely on people who would ordinarily loot every chest and go to every room and probably die to a landmine in Palace of the Dead. But also there's a sense of enjoyment about being a commanding officer that I love, and sending people to battle in front of me at the click of a button is incredibly immersive and fun. A question towards what's next for the main storyline was asked, and Yoshi simply replied with, "We shall see... We still have Doma, who is just starting on their first steps of independence following liberation from the oppression of the Gallian Empire. What story awaits our Warrior of Light after the dust from the chaos of war has settled?" This would be a spoiler, so I'd like to refrain from going into any more details, but I'm sure a surprising story awaits. I remember seeing that assassin-like guy hanging around in Doma after you've finished that part of the storyline in 4.0. This probably means we'll see more from a certain group of island-stranded characters, which I'm all for. I love those characters, they're some of my favourite in the storyline. Hopefully the story starts going in a more direct route, as there's been very little in the way of the Empire's involvement after the liberation. I was expecting a bit of a backlash from them, but we've not seen that yet, which is surprising to say the least. Next, asking about expansions, simply got the reply, "We are already moving forward with making our next expansion pack a reality. I have written a text-based storyboard for the expansion pack's opening trailer. We will have more exciting things to come." This shouldn't come as a surprise. Expansions are usually in the works during the release of the previous content to meet deadlines. The 2-year gap between releases gives players little downtime with the content patches, and after that 2-year period is up, there's a slight lull, and then you've got a brand new expansion. It's still nice to hear even a storyboard being written about. It just gives you something to look forward to, in my opinion. Return to Evilis was asked about next, specifically difficulty. Yoshida replied, "I'd like to provide content that isn't necessarily more difficult than it is now, but ensures that we don't lose that element of thrill and excitement that comes with it. We added quite a few brand new mechanics which may have contributed to the challenging feel that came with it." End quote. I think that Evilis was certainly one of the more enjoyable Alliance raids I've done personally. Mechanically it wasn't that tough for myself, but I admit that it just felt more fleshed out than many of the other raids. It has a sense of progression to it. I think that's primarily due, however, to the use of nostalgia to drive me personally to want to enjoy it. Seeing Mateus and Hashmal certainly gives me a smile every time, considering how much I enjoyed Final Fantasy XII. The final question was about Final Fantasy XII again, and whether or not we'll ever see the Viera as a playable race. If you're unfamiliar with the Viera, they're basically bunny girls from the Final Fantasy XII world. Go and Google one now, you'll be interested. This is the first time I've seen Yoshida actually reply to this properly. He says, "We shall see... Conversations on new races and jobs in Final Fantasy XIV is super top secret. I would be risking my life if I were to talk about it. Let us say that only the Mother Crystal knows," and then a sort of like smiley lick face. It's a good chance they might consider Viera. Out of all of the other races from Final Fantasy, it's certainly one of the most requested by the public, probably one of the most doable in terms of making gear for it, with very little changes needed from how it works on current races. Personally, I would love to play as a Bangar or either a Kikirin, but, you know, we're probably never going to see those. Either way, that wraps up this interview. A huge thanks to Dualshockers this year for putting together some truly great interview questions. I love looking at the articles every single time they're posted, especially when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV. Go support their site if you can in the description of this video. Let me know what you think about any of today's topics below, and I will indeed see you all next time.